It is so counterintuitive. Eat meat, eggs, cheese, lose weight. NBC Chief Science Correspondent Robert Bazell tonight with a new study.
Here's the most important thing to remember. The studies on these
foods takes on one of the biggest diet debates. Is it more important to cut carbs or fat if you want to lose weight and stay healthy? Here with what the researchers found.
Is one healthier than the other? Is one healthier than the other?
I think low carb, metabolically and nutritionally, is healthy.
Good News America. Beef, eggs, butter, and tropical oils all back on the menu with a thumbs up from many experts.
The government altering guidelines for cholesterol consumption. More and more health experts are taking a fresh look at saturated fat foods that have been on the don't eat list for decades.
There's really no evidence to show that the low-fat diet has any advantage, and now there's really compelling evidence to the contrary.
This latest study was run by the Harvard School of Public Health. The study compared 3 diets: a low-fat diet, a Mediterranean diet, an Atkins-type diet, where people did not worry about calories but replaced carbohydrates, mostly with protein and fat from fish, chicken, and vegetable sources. Some experts worried about their health risks, especially cholesterol and other risk factors for heart disease. The Atkins-type diet was the winner, with people losing an average of just over 12 pounds.
These findings, though, are still going to be considered, I would guess, controversial because this was funded in part by the Atkins Foundation.
Packaging was always very seductive.
All in the media, and magazines.
Media is about being thinner, being skinny, looking this way, and if you eat this way, you will have the body you want, you will have all the energy you want.
Start losing weight today.
I have tried probably every diet that exists. I've tried them all.
Tried many different diets.
Going back to college days, I tried Atkins.
You know what, you name it, I was the Atkins diet.
A million-year-old diet. Modern age.
The most recent diet that I tried was
They call it one of the most important health breakthroughs of all time, and it doesn't involve a prescription drug or invasive surgery.
When people do this and they experience the health benefit, you know, they become overjoyed. But what's interesting is the very next question they ask: why haven't I heard this before? I have a friend who once told me, the truth is a stubborn thing. It doesn't go away. And when you're committed to the truth, no matter the consequences, your life can take unexpected turns. After growing up on a small Virginia farm, my father went on to discover truths that will forever change the way we eat, grow our food, and relate to our natural environment. My name is Nelson Campbell. For much of my adult life, I've been an advocate of the discoveries my dad made.
Please welcome Dr. Colin Campbell. Doc, what a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you. Dr. Campbell, but what makes the work that you learned about in China so important, so revolutionary with that regard?
Well, my work actually started many years ago in the laboratory. And one of the first things that we did that I found very exciting, we could turn on and turn off the development of cancer, the progression of cancer.
I'm here to talk about health.
When people have a bad diet, that's when they need the Viagra, right, Doc?
Absolutely.
And you're 77, you don't need it, right?
No.
All right, Doc.
Coming from the farm, my dad revered America's protein-rich, animal-based diet. He was the first in his family to go to college and attended Penn State. Then he earned a PhD in nutritional biochemistry at Cornell University. For his dissertation, he studied methods to produce animal protein more efficiently. But for someone in search of truth, nothing is off limits, including one's own biases. In this small church, my mother and father were married in 1962. It was his experience with her mom that proved to be a turning point in his career.
We moved a lot. We didn't have much money, of course. And Mom had an 8th grade education. She was an honest woman. She always had trouble with weight because in those days, gosh, you would eat all this junk food. It's cheap. You never heard anything about nutrition. She had problems with constipation, and I think she saw some butter in the stools, and she went to the doctor. She was around 50, and she went to the doctor and she told him the problems. He didn't do any tests or anything on her. She told her, I think at one point, to go and take some X-Lax to help her bowels move. We were so close, and I think when I went on my honeymoon, as a matter of fact, I was never away from her. I tried to write her a postcard, and I started crying. And then probably about 6 months or maybe later than that, she went back to the doctor, and she just was feeling really bad. And then finally at this time, I guess they checked her out, and they said it was colon cancer, and they put her in the hospital, and she died that spring, the following spring.
It was a difficult time for the family. It was a difficult time for Mom especially, when she learned her mother had this problem with her colon. And it was clear to me what happened to her had a lot to do with the relation between diet and cancer. And I said to myself, that's my future. It still affects me the same today as it did then.
I first met Kim when we were 16, and we married 7 years later. Kim is the chef in our family. Over the years, she's perfected the art of using flavor and texture to prepare plant-based foods. This is the diet that we've been eating for the past 25 years, and it's nothing like the one I grew up on.
Good food today.
Back then, we were taught that there were 4 food groups, and that we had to consume dairy products and meat every day. But it was my dad whose research helped give expression to the idea that there was only one important food group: whole plant-based foods.
Water has dried up in that county. They hit the bottom. There's no water available in the county now.
Wow.
Anyway.
I have many memories of growing up with my family. The most vivid ones come from this farm in the mountains of Virginia.
Well, one of the things we had to do in my day was contend with hills. And this scene right here is just perfect for me. Brings back old memories because I used to have to go get the cows in the morning.
And I'd ride my horse down from up here and bring the dog and Laddie, and we'd come down here for hours and hours.
You know the prices, of course. Their family had farmed this whole area through here for generations.
This is actually the family cemetery. What this really speaks to is the fact that families stayed in the same place for hundreds of years.
That's called
and,
stability.
Yeah, sometimes, you know, I think that there's an unsettled feeling that people have. I mean, back then people were anchored to the land, they were anchored to one another, connected to nature, connected through time.
Stanchions along here, when the cows would come in, they knew exactly which stanchion they should go to. They'd come in.
But today, people feel like they have no control over their lives. I mean, these people here...
At least they knew their surroundings.
Yeah.
They really knew their surroundings.
Well, they had that connection.
Yeah.
Well, the whole story really started with my dad's ideas of health. And the essence of his idea is that we have enormous control over our health merely by what we choose to eat. And it was that idea that attracted the attention of a legislator in Kentucky. So in November of 2011, my dad and Dr. Esselstyn, his colleague, were invited to speak to the legislature from the floor of the Kentucky House. And Kentucky has some of the worst health statistics in the nation.
The topic that I really want to share with you, it really has to do with the way we think about nutrition.
We obviously were flattered that he would give us some time, and we were gracious enough to be listening to what he had to say. I mean, you could hear a pin drop in that chamber, I thought, which was unusual for the chamber. All the members were so attentive. They wanted to learn, they wanted to hear.
What is so exciting is the fact that all you have to do to make yourself heart attack proof is change your biochemistry internally.
I found this staggering.
My dad's and Dr. Esselson's talks that day were historic. Never before had the idea of plant-based nutrition been presented from the floor of a state legislature.
So there you have it. Thank you very much for your time.
My dad got a very enthusiastic response, and he was so excited he called me up the next day, and that's when I got involved. At the time, I'd been working on an idea for a nutritional intervention program in North Carolina, and I sensed an opportunity to do the same thing in Kentucky to demonstrate the health benefits of a plant-based diet to the Kentucky legislature. I was highly motivated to do this because I knew my dad's research well, including a study that he had done in China, the most comprehensive study ever done of the relationship between diet and disease.
And so the China study was really an opportunity in a human setting to see if what we were learning in the laboratory had any bearing for a human population. Well, at the time that we were organizing the China study, we knew that for about a dozen different cancers, they were very common in some counties in China and much less common in other counties. Just that observation was interesting. I also was aware at that time that we couldn't really look at single nutrients and what role they might play. I was thinking of nutrients collectively working as in food. So the object of the China study was for me to measure as many things we possibly could.
My dad's research team collected blood, urine, and questionnaire data from 6,000 patients in 60 counties across China and measured a total of 367 variables. Then they let the computers go to work, searching for patterns among nearly 100,000 correlations that might indicate the relationship of food to disease outcomes.
As I looked at that body of correlations, I could see patterns emerging, somewhat like a hologram. You stare at this complexity and suddenly you start to see something emerge. And when I saw all of these variables in the food together with stuff in the blood, comparing it with all the disease outcomes, we tended to get the same answer. That the closer we would get to a whole food plant-based diet, the healthier we would be and the less disease we would incur. And that in turn was consistent with what I previously had been doing in the laboratory and what in fact also existed in literature from other places.
My interest in the opportunity with the Kentucky legislature also stemmed from my knowledge of the history of this idea. For many years, researchers have suspected that animal protein is not optimal for human health. This information has sometimes bubbled to the surface only to get buried in a sea of misinformation because of the influence of industry and government. A perfect example of this was in the late 1970s with a Senate committee chaired by Senator George McGovern.
So the Govern Committee held a series of hearings and published a report, Dietary Goals for Americans. The Dietary Goals for Americans realized that many of the problems, the chronic diseases, were related to the increases in saturated fat and cholesterol and sugar, refined carbohydrate consumption. And so there was this shift towards we need to move towards some of the foods eaten by societies that weren't plagued by these chronic degenerative conditions. So if you look at the populations around the world that are not dying of our 10 leading killers, it is rural Africa and rural China. And they have kind of, in one sense, remarkably different diets, at the same time actually remarkably similar diets. And without those studies that showed people this remarkable variability of disease rates around the world was not genetics, right? It's not just that people have different genes, but when you transplant people, they acquire the disease rates of where they're going, and generation after generation it gets worse and worse as they lose some of their traditional plant-based eating and start kind of accumulating this kind of Western lifestyle. And I think it was in that environment that the McGovern Committee said Americans need to shift their diets towards a more plant-based diet. The report first came out January 1977. but was kind of beaten back by some of the politics, and such that there was kind of a much watered down report by the end of that year.
I have pleaded in my report and will plead again orally here for more research on the problem before we make announcements to the American public.
Well, I would only argue that senators don't have the luxury that a research scientist does of waiting until every last shred of evidence is in.
The greatest pushback came from the meat and egg industries, but the sugar industry called McGovern a puritanical do-gooder. The Salt Institute came out very strongly. The dairy industry wanted the goals scrapped. So not only did the agricultural lobby win in terms of changing the wording of the report, but they had the entire Nutrition Committee disbanded. And so, I mean, it really changed even how nutrition policy was going to go forward in the federal government. Hey, I mean, you look at, and these political reverberations continue to this day.
I saw good people making really stupid decisions. They didn't want to get crosswise of the mainstream. The mainstream being greatly influenced by the corporate sector.
Dairy products, nature's most nearly perfect food. And remember this, Tom, where the demand for other may fluctuate over the years, not milk and its products. Because folks need milk every day as much as, well, almost as much as the oxygen in the air.
I just saw these outside forces coming in and shaping our knowledge. Not only shaping our knowledge in very narrowly focused ways, but also working hard to keep this from the public.
This is what is laying to waste. I mean, the most likely reason our loved ones will die is heart disease, which is completely preventable, treatable, often reversible. I mean, and so, I mean, people should be angry that they don't know. Why didn't anyone tell me this?
I had gotten fed up with the corporate invasion of what I thought was academia. Of course, I was being pretty idealistic. My research was handsomely funded for years by public money and only public money. And here they're not being allowed to hear this information. I felt like I owed something to the taxpayer. I kind of got fed up with it, and of course I was coming home and complaining to my wife about this, and she said, "Why don't you just sit down and write a book?"
With the help of my brother Tom, my dad began to write the China Study. In 2005, the book was published and almost instantly became a national bestseller.
Well, the conclusion was that the closer we get, started with my graduate school days in the late 1950s.
Heart disease, stroke. I'm talking about going from meat to plants.
And my words they ring, and the birds sing song.
No dairy, no meat. I went on essentially a plant-based diet. I recommend that Dr. Campbell, father and son, on the China diet.
If he could get 15,000 books sold, if he get that, I'd get my expenses covered. Now it's sold well over 1 million.
You've got to stay on top, you've got to float and sting, and then they shove me in, and my words come true. Well, my words come true.
Claudia and I picked up the China Study, and we got on the diet. Cholesterol went down about 50 points. On the impact on my whole system made me want to spread the word on how to eat in a way that'll reverse health problems.
Tom Reiner is a longtime member of the Kentucky House of Representatives. When not in the capital city of Frankfort, he manages a homeless shelter and pastors a small church in Louisville. Tom's district is predominantly African American, and the voters there have kept him in office for 33 years.
Each presentation will be about 45 minutes. The speaker appointed me to represent the House on a joint House and Senate task force on childhood obesity, that we might help others in the fight for better health in Kentucky. So the first thing I wanted to do was to invite Dr. Campbell and Dr. Esselstyn to Kentucky. Dr. Campbell, I think we're ready for you.
After my dad's talk in Kentucky, I picked up the phone and I started talking with Representative Tom Reiner. And over a series of conversations, we came up with an idea for House Bill 550. And what we were proposing was to do a 2-week program in a poor community in eastern Kentucky to demonstrate this health concept. And the idea was simple: pre and post biometric testing, some education, and 2 weeks of prepared meals. Now, we also offered to do this with our own financial resources, but with the understanding that upon success, we would have the opportunity to sit down with the state to discuss a statewide rollout strategy, initially focusing on low-income communities across Kentucky.
I have a lot of confidence in Tom, what he does. If he is for something, I have confidence in him as a representative that he's doing the right common sense thing. And I thought it was a good start to get some recognition. The General Assembly in any state is, there's a lot of eyes on us, there's a lot of media on us, and I voted for it because I thought it was a good idea.
The bill seemed to enjoy strong initial support, but once it went behind closed doors, the reality of politics set in, and it was ugly.
It was some of the most intense lobbying against a measure of this sort that I've ever seen.
I thought that would be one that everyone would be for. You know, this is a good idea. Who could be against it, right? Well, you got to realize that there's a lot of interest, big money interest, that they don't want any changes because of the bottom line, which is $1.
They would not hear it on the House floor unless I agreed to amendments. So it took something that had the strength of steel, and we, after we got through with it, it had the strength of Reynolds wrap.
You know, we had put a lot into this, and so I was deeply disappointed when we failed. And I got wind that it was the agricultural lobby who had undermined our bill, and it got me to thinking, who were they representing? This experience lit something within me. Special interests had killed our proposal, but not our idea. I decided to do the pilot project anyway, on my own, back home in North Carolina. It was at this point that we decided to document this. I'd never made a film before, but felt like this could be a story worth sharing. For years, the wellness industry has targeted the upper-income, college town kind of demographic. So in thinking about where to do our pilot project, we thought first of the nearby community of Chapel Hill. I knew we could succeed in a town dominated by North Carolina's flagship university, but decided instead on a more mainstream community. Home to just over 12,000 residents, Mebane is a town west of Chapel Hill, with rolling farmland on its outskirts and tree-lined neighborhood streets, plenty of churches, and a quaint downtown area. This is a beautiful small town, and this here's the main street.
The atmosphere is one of southern charm. It's just a lovely place to live.
Everybody pretty much knows everybody. I think that it creates kind of like a sense of family.
We're in the land of barbecue here. Some of the world's best barbecues here in North Carolina. As a kid growing up, that was one of my favorite flavors. But we're also in what some people refer to as the stroke belt.
Well, typically the South is known for fried food, but I would say probably a lot of red meat, chicken, yeah, probably fried up, the better, French fries, all that good stuff.
I just can't imagine life without meat, I guess. Any kind of meat. I love meat. Bacon. Love bacon.
Fried chicken and green beans. The green beans with bacon and butter
and stuff like that.
Well, why don't you just throw out the green beans and eat the bacon and butter?
Yeah.
You know, a lot of people think an idea like this won't take hold in a community where people are used to eating this way. But I don't believe that for a second, and it's why I wanted to come here.
My reaction when Nelson made the proposal to do a jump start in small town Mebane was a little bit shocking. I was very concerned about whether or not people would be open to the idea of doing plant-based. The culture in rural America, I don't care what state you're in, is that everything revolves around food and unhealthy food. But I was also very excited about it because I know that when somebody finds something good in a town like that, it spreads like a virus.
So when we got started in Mebane, the first thing we needed was a name. Pure comes from the Latin word meaning clean or clear, which sounds to me descriptive of nature. That's why I like the term PlantPure. My biggest challenge was finding people to participate. And I really didn't know how to get started. In fact, I remember sitting at my desk one day and just not quite sure what to do. And then I had the bright idea, well, just go start talking to people. So I went down to the town's only coffee shop and I started talking with the store manager and her mother. Ended up having a great conversation. And turns out they were very helpful to me in helping to recruit the initial participants. Blood pressure, cholesterol, insulin, and arthritis. Italian dishes, you know, a few Mexican dishes, a lot of just plain old, good old-fashioned American dishes.
Right.
Hey Terry,
hey.
We just got a small building and we're going to be using that as a place where we make the food available and do jump starts and do classes. So I was finally able to find 16 people to participate in a program that we were calling our PlantPure Jumpstart program. And the first step in that program is biometric testing. So to do that, I went out and I recruited a biometric testing company.
We use analyzers where we can create what we call a motivational moment. So we provide results immediately, so we can sit there at that point in time and say, you need to make a change.
Our message transcends political and cultural boundaries. First of all, personal responsibility. So then we sat everyone down and we had a 2-hour education session.
This doesn't take very long at all.
Also, guys, with tempeh, there's usually a local person that makes it.
And then that was followed by 10 days of freshly prepared meals. And to do that, we used the kitchen space at Reed's.
We started out with a lot of traditional recipes and we veganized them. Some examples are we made lasagna and stuffed it with tofu and added a lot of spinach and mushrooms. We used spaghetti and meatballs. We had a meatloaf, which was a lentil loaf, not a meatloaf. And as we went further, we added some quinoa. We added some unusual burgers. I'm thinking of the edamame burger and different things.
So when I found that initial group, I tried really hard to get a cross-section of the community. So we had a politician, a business executive, a journalist, and a local cattle farming couple. This is something that's very important to me when we talk about this idea of plant-based nutrition.
We will do it again in 10 days.
To me, the essence of what we're doing here is we're talking about taking control of your health out of the hands of the industry and government and putting it back to you. Okay, so this is the idea here. The words that people oftentimes use to describe this are vegetarian or vegan, but it's a whole foods plant-based diet.
Do you want 3-bean jambalaya?
Whole foods is important because you can be a junk food vegan. You can eat lots of sugar and oil and be very unhealthy. So the meal plan that we're going to be giving you is made from all whole foods components. So on the 4th day of the jump start, I decided to go out and visit the cattle farming couple. I knew that they were coming at this from a very different perspective. I remember we had that first session, and I remember you specifically saying, that you had some skepticism because you were the carnivore in the group, and I like that honest feedback. But I'm just curious how you're feeling now.
Yeah, I actually feel good. You know, I sleep well. I've totally enjoyed everything I've eaten so far. I'm not bloated feeling.
As a farmer, how do you feel about the idea that maybe the future of farming could be in plants as opposed to dairy and livestock?
Well, I think that my family's always sort of been progressive in that way. My family didn't start in livestock. They started in pickles and preserves. And then they went to dairy and then the beef. So I think anytime you diversify, you're better off and being more sustainable.
So your total cholesterol was 176, and it went down to 139. Your LDL went from 84 to, I can't tell how much there is because there's less than 45.
Really?
Yeah.
Can't get any better than that. Thank
Pretty
you.
fine. Triglycerides were 153, which was at risk, and they dropped to 66.
My goodness, that kept me from getting the best life insurance rate that I could get, the triglycerides being high before. So that's...
Your LDL?
Average cholesterol fell from 196 to 148.5. LDL cholesterol went from 118 down to 86. Every single person here had significant improvement. The first jump start went really well, so we decided, well, let's see how far we can take this. And so we decided to do a second jump start. In organizing that jump start, I thought about someone who had participated in the first jump start, Aubrey Metter.
As I participated in that 10-day jump start, I saw great results for me. I realized that, this can have a significant impact on my health, and if it helps me this much, I'd love to bring this to our employees and see what it could do for our whole employee base.
This is an opportunity for you to sort of serve as a case study for employers across the country.
Creating a better workplace environment was probably my #1 motivation to want to bring this year. Hoping to reduce our healthcare costs, that's certainly something that's top of mind for everybody.
The aggregate amount of money that we spent on healthcare in the United States in 2012 was about $2.8 trillion, about $8,912 for every man, woman, and child in the United States.
The healthcare cost trajectory is out of control because the consumers are not in charge. And because we've grown up with the system, we don't realize how strange it is. But if you go to a clinic or hospital and ask in advance what it costs, you get a very strange look. It means one of two things. Either you're uninsured or you're crazy. Why would you want to know the price? And so the system spins out of control. It would be as if you went to a restaurant, ordered a splendid bottle of wine, and said, I don't care what it costs, let Blue Shield or Medicare or Aetna worry about the thing. The system goes haywire.
The Congressional Budget Office has reported for many years that if we stay on the current trajectory, we will have an overwhelming part of the federal budget devoted only to Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security. Unsustainable trends can't go on forever.
It's really frustrating because when you look at the healthcare debate out there today, it's all focused on who pays the bill, but they're not really talking about how to reduce the bill, right? They're arguing about should the government pay for it, should the private sector pay for it, should be some combination of both. But the truth of the matter is that regardless of who pays the bill, they're going to go bankrupt.
When I entered medicine in the 80s, we still had time to spend with people. When I was sort of coming of age in medicine in the 90s, that's when HMOs began to make their way into medical care. And those systems were run by business people. And those business people started setting certain kinds of standards for productivity, how much time you could spend with patients. And when I left practice, I had 10-minute visits. What can you do in 10 minutes with someone? You can write a prescription.
My name is Tommy Privet. I'm 59 years old, and I am serving a church and have been for this church 9.5 years, but in ministry since I was 19 years old. My health issues, the worst issue is the diabetes, type 2 diabetes, and I was first diagnosed when I was 23 years old. So that's been about 36 years. And I also have hypertension, my blood pressure, and cholesterol issues, and I take medication for all of that. And it gets a little wearisome having to keep up with all those medications. And as I'm getting a little older now, it's more difficult for me to keep everything in control. I've actually been eating a plant-based diet for 4.5 months now. I've lost 40 pounds, and so that has really gone well, and I'm still losing. I was taking 7 medications when I went on the plant-based diet. Altogether, I think I've gotten off of 5, totally, just totally off.
So, what is the case?
What'd you do there?
Oh my gosh, I have to show you the picture. People and physicians alike can accept that nutrition is the cause of a lot of our chronic diseases. And we've accepted that pharmacology is a treatment for our chronic disease. It's a drug that treats 2 things. It treats the cancer, and it's also treating. You take a blood pressure pill for your blood pressure, and you take a diabetes pill, and you take a chemotherapy pill for your cancer. I think it's difficult for them still to accept nutrition as a treatment for our chronic diseases.
We have all these guidelines, that were judged by companies. Did you prescribe this? Yes. Did you prescribe this? Yes. See that little fire there? That's a little blue looking back. Because you imagine when you come to work every day and someone's always sick. You can go this way here, complaining of chest pain, not feeling well, in for another procedure, another stent, another bypass surgeries. They kept taking more and more medications. And I saw people not getting better. Well, after practicing for a couple decades now, I realized that this wasn't the best way. So I started looking for more information.
We've built this whole system of medical care and health care using our own so-called intelligence. Very mechanical kind of information. We think we're smart. We think we can outshine nature. I mean, nature is very complex, extraordinarily complex, beyond our comprehension. The unit of biology that traditionally is considered is the cell. Within just one cell, it's infinitely complex. We have a total of something but like 10 and 100 trillion cells in our body. And so we get these 10 to 100 trillion universes all working together, talking to each other, communicating with each other. It's an orchestration that's beyond belief. That's nature.
So we've seen a dramatic rise in the use of prescription medications over the last 20 years. Again, the rate of heart disease continues to soar. Cancer, diabetes, mental health problems soar. If medications were the answer, why aren't these numbers coming down?
So nature, as far as our health is concerned, is comprised of just countless mechanisms and chemicals all working together. Drugs, in contrast, aside from the fact that they're a single chemical, also is a chemical that's a foreign compound. It has toxic properties. It only stands to reason. That kind of approach causes side effects. And all one needs to do watch the television.
Women should not take or handle Navidart due to risk of a specific birth defect, constipation, and abnormal vision. Doctor, if you experience increased gambling, sexual, or other intense urges. In extreme cases, this can lead to coma or death, or if you have muscle movements that cannot be stopped.
Suicidal thoughts or actions.
Tell your doctor right away if you have an allergic reaction that causes swelling of the face, lips, tongue, or throat, or affects your breathing.
And just look at all the listed side effects that they have to put there. And rest assured, that's the ones they have to put there, because somebody told them to. There's still more that never make that cut.
Only 2 countries in the world allow pharmaceutical companies to advertise directly to consumers on television: the United States and New Zealand. This advertising is highly effective. A recent Harvard study found that 3 of 4 people who ask for a drug from their physician get it. 70% of Americans today are now taking 1 drug. Over 50% are taking 2 drugs, and 20% are taking 5 or more drugs.
I knew I had to get my cholesterol under control, but exercise and eating healthy weren't enough for me.
It was only 2 or 3 minutes after I started that I felt a tightness in my chest, like I couldn't catch my breath.
Diet and exercise weren't enough for me. I stopped kidding myself.
Do you think there's truth to that idea, that for a lot of people that maybe diet and exercise are not enough?
I happen to have high blood pressure, and diet and exercise wasn't enough, so I am taking pills.
I think frequently, yes. Frequently they need drugs.
But I think cholesterol is largely genetic.
I definitely think that diet and exercise are not totally enough.
You know, I get fired up when I see these ads on TV. They're downplaying the ability of me to take care of my own health. The patients that come to my office, I would estimate that 80 or 90% of those patients, if they would adopt a whole food plant-based diet, their condition would dramatically improve.
When we did the Mebane Jumpstart, the very first Jumpstart, we offered 10 days of food, and we offered a lunch and a dinner, and nothing was ever repeated. So they had a completely new recipe, new entree at every meal. So it was exciting for the people coming in.
So it's really about eating whole plant-based food, whole grains, and the fruits and vegetables and nuts and all of that.
And the Jumpstarts were getting bigger. And then we rented a kitchen and we started producing out of that kitchen, which was a really nice, large-sized kitchen. We brought in a couple extra chefs and hired some more people, and that's when it became a real system, and it was interesting to watch.
So in the third Jumpstart, I was able to recruit 50 people, and they came from 2 local churches.
And we're gonna let Nelson come, and then he's gonna take it from there. Amen.
One of those churches was located about 10 miles or so north of town out in the countryside. This is an idea that comes from nature, and we know where nature comes from. In fact, this idea is more powerful than any medicine that any doctor could ever prescribe.
For Nelson to come in, I was really interested, and I felt like the Lord had led him there. That's what I felt like. I said, this is for me. Because I had also gone to the doctor that same day and got some bad news. Because the doctor had actually told me that, okay, I'm a type 2 diabetic. I'm on glucotrol and metformin. She told me, she said, your next step is insulin. She told me there's no cure for diabetes. She said, type 2 diabetes, there's no cure, Patty. And when I left that doctor's office that day, I was discouraged and I was depressed.
How many hours do doctors get of nutrition training? I personally didn't get any through medical school, residency, or fellowship.
I got no classes in nutrition in medical school. I don't believe nowadays that people get a lot of nutrition in medical school. It probably varies from school to school, but it's not a lot of hours. When I read the China study, my emotional reaction to it was one of horror, that I did not know any of this information and that I had been practicing medicine poorly. As I think back on it, I didn't know anything about nutrition.
Good. What is that, Kayla?
A house.
A house. You saw a lot of houses last night, didn't you? You sure
The
did.
doctor called me to give me my results. Patty, I said, yes, ma'am. I want to give you your total cholesterol numbers. You're doing great. You're down 60 points. I said, oh, good. Continue to take your Provocol, Patty. I said, I sure will. I never opened the bottle. I don't even know what the medicine is.
I believe that food choices matter. But not only do our food choices matter when it comes to the cruel treatment of animals and to the degradation of our land, food choices also matter because food choices can directly impact our health for better or for worse. Amen. A few weeks ago, Nelson Campbell was invited to our Bible study. He had a radical proposal. He said for 10 days, I put a whole plant food-based diet before you. Now I ask you to put it to the test. Yeah. Those of us who tried the whole plant food-based diet for 10 days, we saw remarkable drops. All right, come on. Oh, y'all know right about it. In our cholesterol levels, in our weight, and in our blood sugar levels. Those of us who tried this whole plant food-based diet for 10 days can testify which diet is better.
All right.
Every day it seems like there's another fad diet that's out there, and one example of this is the low-carb diet. They emerge every now and then, and the idea is you're leaving out the potatoes and rice and so forth. What it really is an animal-based diet. You'll hear people say that on a low-carb diet you lose weight, you get healthy. When you look at what happens to people over the long run, a great many of them, their cholesterols go up, their heart risk goes up, their long-term cancer risk goes up. The evidence supporting a whole foods plant-based diet is overwhelming. We have hundreds, if not thousands of studies. One of the diseases that people are most concerned about is cancer, and for good reason. A number of studies strongly suggest that a whole foods plant-based diet is not just good for preventing cancer, it also may be powerful for changing the course of cancer once it's been diagnosed. And this is an area ripe for more study. Anybody who speaks against the health benefits of a whole foods plant-based diet either just doesn't know the facts or they've got some economic interest that's at play here. The facts are overwhelming.
My favorite foods are fruits. And being on the plant-based diets, I can eat my fruits now without running my blood sugar numbers up out the sky. They started out, remember, at 340, 350. That's when I first started. Now I'm at 100 and between 125, 130. Once I got back into the doctor's office to see my favorite doctor, we're sitting there and she's talking and I said, you need to be telling the other patients about it because if it helped me, it'll help them. She acted like she didn't hear me. She did. She acted like she didn't hear me.
I think physicians are scared. They're really scared that patients are just going to eat fruits and vegetables and they're not going to take their treatments. And that's not what we're saying, at least not what I'm saying. I'm saying let's have a cohesive relationship between diet and pharmacotherapy. I think that physicians are scared because they don't know how to prescribe a diet.
Things in medicine, just like cigarettes, move slow. I think things in nutrition are moving slower than I'd like, but I do think someday we're going to get there. And I do think if we don't fall in line with that, there's going to be repercussions. Now, is it possible that someday, if you don't discuss a whole food plant-based diet with your patients, could that be considered malpractice? This is up for lawyers and attorneys to decide. But if we think about this logically, we just want what's best for our patients. And as a physician, as I come across new knowledge that's evidence-based, as I've seen my patients' lives change, as I've seen my life change, I would feel guilty and I would feel great remorse if I didn't try to introduce these principles into my patients' lives.
I don't need to beat myself up.
Your total cholesterol is 150.
But my intention is to do this.
Is that accurate?
Yep.
Is that thing working?
Is that?
And we say that what you may find.
You are kidding me.
Triglycerides are 98. They were 395.
Are you sure that's accurate? Holy moly.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Wow. Total cholesterol is 277, went to 150. This is going to be a lifestyle. It's amazing. That's awesome. Wow.
I've worked over the years with many of the manufacturers that make statins. And LDL is the focus. LDL is the number that they all want to bring down because it shows improved metabolic health. And I've been testing for 26 years. We've tested millions of people, and I've never seen results like this.
In 6 months, we completed 5 jump starts, each one larger than the one before, ending with a final group of 130 people. Feeling confident, I decided to take these results back to Kentucky to re-engage with the folks who thought they had killed our idea of a pilot project.
We have been over a dozen blocks without seeing a single grocery store. That's why so many of our people are not able to get good produce. What's your healthiest meal?
What?
Do you have any health meals? Anything that's fresh?
No, we don't.
Okay. Thank you.
About 23 million people in America live in food deserts. And in a country where 1 in 5 kids lives in poverty, there are tens of millions more who can't buy anything but cheap, processed foods.
I remember when I was young, and I'm 52 years young, but when I was little, my mom, you know, downtown was nothing but fresh fruits, because we would come all the way from the Louisville, Newburgh area to come downtown, and you'd get you got everything. It was a market.
The hay market. Yeah.
The hay market. Right. So see, that was a big thing. A lot of families would go, and it'd be crowded, and because you're getting fresh everything.
What happened to that market?
I don't know, but it's been gone.
It's gone. It's a parking lot now.
We don't know what it is now to get a real fresh tomato. You know, everything is shipped in. What I resent is everything is shipped in. It would be super and absolutely wonderful if we can get our local farmers back growing our vegetables again, and where we can have decent vegetables and not have to pay an arm and leg for them. They taste better. Oh, they just melt in your mouth. We need to get our local farmers back out here growing stuff again. I resent the fact that we don't have local people to actually grow vegetables.
The small family farm in America is nearing extinction. The total number of farms has fallen from about 7 million in 1935 to about 2 million today. Every week, over 300 farmers leave their land for good.
Historically, subsidy dollars have flowed to large farmers and not to small farmers. So for example, in the 15-year period that ended 2010, the federal government handed out $161 billion in direct subsidy payments. 2/3 of farmers in this country got nothing. Of that $161 billion, 1/5 of the recipients grabbed 9/10 of the cash. Federal subsidy policy subsidizes 4 main grains: corn, soybeans, wheat, and rice. And those crops figure heavily in the processed foods that we eat. 2 of those, corn and soybeans, also are fed mostly to animals.
We eat animal-based diet, and whether it's raising livestock or monocropping to grow the grains to feed the livestock, it's all economy of scale. So we're going to get a first-hand view of what farming is today, which is nothing like the farm that my grandfather had. So this right here is what they use for monocropping. They have huge, vast fields, and they have a single crop, and this is what they have to use to till the soil. That machine right there, which is built like a Mack truck, is used to saturate the foods that we eat with noxious chemicals. And it's capital intensive. The bigger you are, the more efficient you can be. And of course, in the past, federal subsidies had the effect of driving down prices. So these guys can survive in that environment and prosper, but the little guy can't. The little guy who doesn't have access to this kind of equipment, this kind of land, this kind of capital, it's impossible.
In the last 75 or 80 years in this country, Americans have doubled our per capita meat consumption. We've gone from about 100 pounds per person in the mid-1930s to about just under 200 pounds per person. One of the things that we see in animal production is that animal food producers are externalizing the vast majority of their costs or imposing those costs on society. Those costs include healthcare costs, and then we have this very large environmental cost.
According to the United Nations, 18% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions comes from sending beef and dairy products to your kitchen table.
This report is about finding priority.
Because they're chopping down the rainforest to grow soy to feed to chickens and pigs and other farmed animals.
About 25 to 30% of the land area of the planet is given over for grazing animals.
We've been basically plowing down forest for centuries to make room for crops.
We recalculated how much man-made greenhouse gas came from the livestock sector, from deforestation through forest burning, through raising cattle, and found that instead of being FAO's 18% estimate, we found it was nearer 51%.
So these are man-made gases they're seeing and not natural.
For the first time, that's what the report says.
Now,
if you feel it was unseasonably warm last year, you would be right.
Because 2014 will go down as the warmest year around the globe in recorded history.
9 of the 10 hottest years to date have all occurred during the 21st century.
Aseguran que el año 2014 ha sido el más caluroso jamás registrado.
Sur l'année complète, la température moyenne au sol et sur les océans a été 0,69 degrés au-dessus.
If we focus on animal agriculture, we can reduce warming, but also in the longer term, it's 1/5 the cost of anything else that's on the table.
We have to reduce livestock production. In parallel with that, we have to plant more trees.
We can act. We can walk over to the thermostat and we can change it. We can turn down the heat on this planet.
So we're saying these are critical things for humanity.
In both Kentucky and North Carolina, I've seen hints of a very different future. Once a week in Louisville, a farmer's market springs up in the middle of a food desert.
In this area, what we have is a lack of supermarkets that have the rich produce area, and it's a high quality produce. We also have a high concentration of fast food restaurants.
How do you feel about the whole genetically modified idea?
Well, I don't think you should be changing the DA in anything. That, you know, the earth is pure. You know, when you start changing stuff and it's not really coming from the nourishment of the ground, that where it should come from.
I think if the consumer is aware of what's going on, the consumer will find what the consumer wants. And the business model would then be you follow, you know, the demand. And I think that'll all work out to the benefit of the small farmers, and in a lot of cases, a less processed product.
Now, have you noticed over the past 10 years that you've been involved in this, have you noticed an increase in interest or demand for locally grown food?
Certainly. Back when I started in this, there were 3 farmers markets here in Louisville. We started the 3rd one. Now there's about 26. It's actually happening. A lot of new people coming into small-scale farming.
Having enjoyed double-digit growth every year since its founding, Eastern Carolina Organics acts as a marketing agent for small farmers. These farmers drop off their produce for distribution into local and regional markets, which means they can grow in greater volume and with greater certainty than is possible when selling through a farmer's market.
There's something inherent about people who are seeking out fresh vegetables, organic vegetables. They want to support local farmers. Those values are very, very deeply intertwined within the consumers. And the 100 farmers that I work with personally are very aware that the new trends in healthier eating are directly supporting their farm. So vegetable farming is much more accessible for small and new and young farmers to get into. If they have the support of a regional aggregator, food hub, then they can likely even sustain their family on just 10 or 20 acres. I would say that over 90% of the farms that we work with are making their income fully off of the farm.
When you start to eat this way, this is the kind of food you want. This here is food as medicine. This is food that's grown chemical-free. It's not genetically modified. It's picked when it's ripe. This is what you want. And what's exciting to me is that the small local family farmer supplying into a local market is best able to get this kind of food to the consumer at affordable prices. And this is the David and Goliath story of our time, in my view, that the fact that the small family farmer can outcompete the corporate agribusiness farm from afar, from across the country or from another country altogether. And that's what's exciting to me, is what this could do for the small family farmer. I could now see, better than ever, the connection of all these ideas. I could see what a plant-based world might look like. Healthy individuals empowered to live without drugs. Small family farmers outcompeting agribusiness, supplying wholesome foods to their neighbors, and an environment on the mend. And I could see a local free market of growers, processors, distributors, and retailers beating back the boundaries of food deserts. When I arrived in Kentucky, I met with Tom Reiner, and we decided to pursue a strategy to force government to do something that it has a hard time doing these days, which is acknowledging facts that are unsettling to rich and powerful interests, but vital to the interests of the people. And I knew this wouldn't be easy.
We've basically all over America, it's hard to get significant bills to the floor that have any controversy.
Tom and I were determined to go to any lengths to make this happen. We knew we couldn't just walk in and start making proposals. Tom and I had failed once before, and we were pretty easy targets.
What I'm thinking about is the war.
Tom decided that we needed a local strategic partner, and he suggested Kentucky State University, which is a school located in the capital of Kentucky. KSU has a strong agricultural program. They've worked in food desert communities, and they've done a lot of work with small family farmers. Now, do you do things like that very often in the legislature?
This would be maybe one of the first times that we've committed a university for taking an initiative to reverse the heart disease in the state.
Our focus is on small to mid-sized farmers, always has been, and those farmers see us as providing invaluable information to them, because when I got here, they were seen as invisible to a lot of factions of people.
How has KSU helped you as a farmer?
We've worked with them in the past, our efforts to try to gather a bunch of folks together to take produce to the city of Louisville.
How big is your family? Do you have kids?
I have one son, and I hope he'll be a farmer, but farming is hard work. The reality is there's a lot of stuff out there, and he may try something else.
So if there was one thing that you could say to the American public or to the legislators in Frankfort, Kentucky, about why it's important to save the family farm, what would you say?
America's built on independence, entrepreneurship, and all that. If we keep that in place, we can still stay a leader in the world in some things. If you start getting rid of all small farmers, small businesses, those kind, you don't support them, then eventually it's just going to be one big, large corporation, and everybody's subject to its fallacy.
It's really a pretty crafty idea to get KSU involved, and I think we've come up with a strategy that utilizes the relationship with KSU, and so kind of concealing ourselves and working our way into the political process here to the point where we have an audience. And then once we have an audience, we can tell our story. But that's just the nature of politics. You have to play the game sometimes to win the game. Kind of an interesting process, though, to go through.
So you didn't know you were going to get drafted into drafting legislation.
I know. Proposed legislation is first assigned to a committee for review. Only after getting through the committee can it be assigned to the floor for debate and a vote. Throughout this process, a bill or resolution can be amended, tabled, or rejected outright. So that we could get a fair hearing, we decided to begin with a resolution simply acknowledging the work of KSU. Later, Tom would propose an amendment to this resolution, a formal finding of fact statement recognizing the truth of plant-based nutrition. This was our ultimate goal. Designating February as the Kentucky State University Heart. With the wording set, we submitted our resolution. And within a day, we got a phone call from someone who had the authority to kill this whole effort. We received a phone call, Tom did, from Speaker Stumbo after the legislation was submitted. And apparently he has some interest in this.
We made it, huh?
As you remember, we had been involved in that effort to get the first, legislation passed. And it went into committee and, kind of basically got killed by lobbyists. And the legislation was
by the beef cattle people.
Yeah. The legislation was to promote this idea of whole foods, plant-based nutrition. Now, you would think that in 10 days you wouldn't see that much change. That no one had ever heard of this idea. But I got these folks together, and they had tremendous results. So I just think it's a wonderful opportunity to do the right thing. And
well, I congratulate you on your efforts, and I'll be happy to help you any way I can. Representative Reiner lobbies pretty hard for your causes, and I think a lot of him. And obviously Kentucky has a very bad problem with diet. We're traditionally looked upon as one of the most unhealthy states in the nation. And so anything we can do to help you, we'll be happy to.
But I think with your support, I think that could make the difference, and really appreciate that. We got the support of the Speaker, so we decided to request that our resolution go to a committee chaired by someone friendly to the Speaker, the chairman of the Appropriations and Revenue Committee. Once in committee, where we could offer some powerful testimony, we would add our finding of fact statement acknowledging the facts of plant-based nutrition. Hey, Dad. I'm sitting here with Tom, and Tom has some interesting news. He heard that the chairman of the committee does not want you to come and testify.
He's afraid that it's going to cause a big row and that the whole committee will vote against the resolution.
Well, that's just really disappointing. I think it's time for people within the political arena to take some responsibility. Sorry about that, but I know, Tom, you've done a great job.
Because of the chairman's reaction, we became concerned that he was suspecting that there was more to this than met the eye. So that's when we decided not to offer our amendment in committee, but to wait until we got to the House floor, assuming we got through committee. And in fact, that day we were so paranoid that Tom suggested that I not come to the committee hearing.
Representative Brown, would you like to give us a brief description of the resolution?
Yes, basically it's a resolution commending Kentucky State University for what they're doing in the food desert. Information about the work that KSU is doing to help small farmers.
We became involved in this program several years ago, and we have a program of
I think if it's not clear, it can be troublesome for you later on, that's all.
We have a motion by Representative Wayne, seconded by Representative Prim, that we adopt the title amendment. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed? Dr. Sice, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Both of you.
It could not have been more of a slam dunk. I've never been in a meeting, committee room, where I saw a bill go any faster than this.
In Kentucky, a legislative finding of fact is important. It can be used as a basis for future legislation, and it also can be referenced in a court of law. Our goal was the boldest statement ever by any government anywhere. According to House rules, Tom had to submit the finding of fact amendment on a Friday before the debate and vote the following Monday. As expected, our amendment provoked a strong reaction. I'm really nervous. Didn't sleep much at all last night. I just kept thinking about this. We put a lot of work into this, and it's all coming down to one big event, and I have no idea what's going to happen. Also, we've had a 2.5-week delay because Tom broke his hip. He steps to the Capitol and slipped on some ice, and that was 2 days before he was going to go down to the floor to give a speech and have this bill voted on.
Good to see you.
Yeah, it's exciting today.
It's going to be a good day.
Yeah, you think so?
Yes, I do.
Oh, I love your enthusiasm. So we've been concerned all along that we were going to get discovered But here we are today. We've made it, and we're here, and we're ready to go. So we'll see what happens.
A representative from the Speaker's office and a representative from the majority floor speaker, they came and they asked me, they said, you know, there's a big stir. People are upset about the amendment. And you're not going to call that, are you, today? And I said, well, I've got to at least discuss it. And then finally, the majority floor leader himself came over and spoke to me. He said, well, they would appreciate it if I didn't call for a vote on it.
Despite this resistance, we had one thing in our favor. Tom had personally sat down and walked almost 80 of the 100 members through my dad's book. No legislature anywhere has as much awareness of these ideas as in the Kentucky House.
House Resolution 77, a resolution commending Kentucky State University for its efforts promoting public health and designating February as Kentucky State University Heart Healthy Month. Representative Reiner.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from Jefferson, 41.
In 2012, I worked with Dr. Campbell's son, Nelson, on drafting House Bill 550 to improve the health of an at-risk Kentucky community. After lobbyists pressured members to kill the project, those resources were diverted to help a rural community in North Carolina. Over several months, Nelson Campbell conducted 10-day jump starts, putting people on a plant-based diet. Those with total cholesterol of 175 or higher experienced an average of 20% drop. Many participants had the option of getting off medications for type 2 diabetes as well as cholesterol-lowering medication. God only knows how many lives could have been saved had these truths about improving the health of our people not been suppressed for nearly a half a century. Suppression of truth to please lobbyists for billion-dollar corporations is a device used by dictators, not by virtuous American leaders. Today is our opportunity to lead by recognizing the most basic truths about good nutrition. This short amendment reads, numerous scientific studies now confirm that a whole foods diet comprised primarily of vegetables, fruits, grains, legumes, and nuts without added oil, sugar, and salt is optimal for human health, not only preventing a broad range of diseases and illnesses, but also reversing some of the most dangerous chronic conditions. This finding is of the highest importance to the Commonwealth because it communicates a truth that has the power to save lives. Mr. Speaker, I move adoption and call for a roll call vote on House Floor Amendment number 1.
Motion made and motion seconded for adoption of House Floor Amendment number 1 to House Resolution 77. Is there discussion? The chair recognizes the gentleman from Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and certainly the gentleman from Jefferson is bringing us something he is very concerned about, and we all want to be healthier. But, Mr. Speaker, I do have a concern with the amendment because in looking at the amendment, it looks like the absence of perhaps meat as part of your diet seems to be taking us in a direction that is possibly not the best direction for all Kentuckians. So I would have to, in great respect for my friend from Jefferson, but I would have to ask us to oppose this amendment.
Questions on adoption of House Floor Amendment number 1. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Jefferson, 35.
I'd like to speak on the amendment, Mr. Speaker. To respond to the gentleman from Harrison, I think if you read the amendment carefully, the word primarily is there. Diet based primarily on some of these plants. And I don't think that contradicts anything that, that the medical community is advising these days.
Questions on the adoption of House Floor Amendment number 1 to House Resolution 77. Is there further discussion? Chair recognizes the gentleman from Allen, 22.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I would rise in complete respect for the gentleman's and the emphasis on placing more plant product into our body and less animal product. But I would remind the body that America has, over the long term, had a protein-rich diet that has allowed us to be progressive in so many ways. And as we've taken American culture around the world, one of the things that we've done is certainly added protein to folks' diet through meat. And I realize that that brings certain other issues with it. And I'm sure that the gentleman from Jefferson could explain those to us pretty clearly. The China study is a really interesting piece, and I think there's a lot to be learned from it. But I think we need to be really cautious when we push our diet all in one direction. So we need to think about that as we consider this amendment. Thank you.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from Harrison.
Thank you again, Mr. Speaker. And Lord, if the gentleman from Jefferson might consider perhaps withdrawing this amendment and taking another look at it and insert perhaps putting meat or meat products in that definition. If he'd like to do that, then certainly we'd have something we could work with, but that's just a suggestion today, Mr. Speaker.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from Nelson, 50, to speak on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In reading the amendment carefully, I don't know how anyone can disagree with it. It simply states that numerous studies have found that. And there's really no disagreeing with that. Having experienced a plant-based diet for about a 6-month period, I think everything that the gentleman, the sponsor, has said is true. But the amendment itself is flat out true. You can't dispute it. Thanks, Mr. Speaker.
Questions on the adoption of House Floor Amendment number 1 to House Resolution 77. Is there further discussion? 2 or more members calling for a roll call. Roll call vote will be had. Those in favor of the adoption of House Floor Amendment number 1 will signify by voting yea. Those opposed, nay. Roll call machines open for your voting. Have all members voted? Any member wishing to change or explain his or her vote? Have all members voted? Clerk will take the roll. Roll call machine showing 34 members voting yea, 44 members voting nay. House Floor Amendment number 1 is defeated.
Agribusiness is so big in their districts that this would be an election issue that could knock them right out of the box.
There wasn't any money attached to it. It was just a paragraph on a resolution, and yet they couldn't even vote in favor of that.
Well, the truth is a stubborn thing. It doesn't go away.
Yeah.
When I was looking at this, I had to make a choice. So I kept digging deeper to see if it's really true. And I got to give my father credit for that, because he basically said, whatever you do in the future, never forget, tell the truth, always. Mm-hmm. And so I asked Mom, are we willing to live in a double-wide trailer? And she said, as I said, of course.
Because telling the truth was what was most important.
It was the only thing that mattered. If I lost my job, I could lose my job.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't make a difference. It's been said by many people many times over, I'm sure, but telling the truth is a sense of freedom. If I had to tell something that wasn't quite right or give it a different sort of cast a different light on it, I would never feel free from my own, my own sense of self. I couldn't.
Dr. Campbell certainly has been a good person to get the word out. He's sort of a Johnny Appleseed on information, getting it out there, spreading the good word, and he certainly got my attention. That's the key thing, get the information out. The government will be the last to get it. Politicians are followers.
Who do they follow?
They will follow the voters.
They call it one of the most important health breakthroughs of all time, and it doesn't involve a prescription drug or invasive surgery. Instead, it calls for the classic advice we've heard since we were children. Eat your veggies.
All good. Sounds simple enough, but difficult to convince those who were raised on Southern comfort foods like meat and potatoes.
Well, it all began when a nutritional scientist inspired a Kentucky state representative to propose that pilot program that could potentially prove the health benefits of a plant-based diet.
We're getting ready to hold the first rally of this kind that we're aware of anywhere. I think there's an incredible potential for a movement to emerge. And in any movement, the first step is always the hardest.
It's not just going to come down as a mandate from government. Big societal change never comes that way. Fundamentally, it's going to come from people who are taking the effort at the grassroots level.
We sort of used guerrilla tactics to try to get local media exposure. We got in the feature section of the paper. We were in a couple of magazines. We had 3 radio interviews. And when people move to this way of eating, they discover. We want them first and foremost to understand the incredible power they have over their own power. We got on the morning show in Louisville.
Which leads to another plateau of emotional freedom.
And when people do this and they experience the health benefit, you know, they become overjoyed. But what's interesting is the very next question they ask, the very next thing they say is, why haven't I heard this before? I'm really nervous. Our thesis is that we've got to change this world from the bottom up. And for me personally, I need to see a crowd here tonight to vindicate that idea. And I don't know if we're going to get that or not. I have no idea who's going to show up. We'll have to wait and see.
Heard about it online, actually. We live in Champaign-Urbana, so we came down for this, and I have family in Kentucky.
And now I have the pleasure of introducing Nelson Campbell.
Many of you here already know my father is a world-renowned nutritional researcher from Cornell University.
The amount of money that we spend to create the kind of health situation we have, it's not working. Our system is about gaining wealth for the few. Unfortunately, at the expense of the health of the many.
The story began over 2 years ago.
I'm a researcher in the laboratory.
Suppression of truth to please lobbyists for billion-dollar corporations is a device used by dictators, not by virtuous American leaders.
Roll call machine's open for your voting. Have all members voted? Any member wishing to change or explain his or her vote? Have all members voted? Clerk will take the roll. Roll call machine showing 34 members voting yea, 44 members voting nay. House Floor Amendment number 1 is defeated.
Our intent to show people why they haven't heard this before. Why? Because revolutions can't start without awareness. The question is, how do we foster a revolution like that? And so our strategy is a very humble one, and it's people-centric. Because the reality is that this idea is actually quite simple. It's something that is accessible to everyone. It's something that people can share with those around them. We're going to work to create a national grassroots movement. And we're setting up a template so that anyone in any town and city across America can set up a local chapter of that foundation. We're calling these local chapters pods. And we're going to be creating local pods that enable people to be activists within their own communities. So we're going to be planting a lot of seeds. We believe that we need to launch a movement that engages millions of people everywhere to fix a problem that industry and government have largely created. I hope this rally tonight marks the beginning of an organized movement to bring about this change. And we have an exciting vision to share, the vision of a PlantPure Nation. In this PlantPure Nation, our kids grow up full of health and life. In this nation, we age gracefully, not wasting away in illness and in nursing homes. How does that sound? And in this nation, the small family farmer once again becomes the foundation of our system of food production and distribution. And in this PlantPure Nation, we no longer raise billions of animals for slaughter in inhumane conditions behind the public eye. And in this PlantPure Nation, we help to restore the world's climate, rainforests, and topsoil. This is a PlantPure Nation. So if there was someone sitting here in this chair making a lot of money doing something that contributes to another person's poor health, like your mom, what would you say to that person?
Money doesn't mean that much.
Well, what's important?
What's important? Caring about others, love, honesty. I think that's very important. If you have those things, then you're going to do pretty well in life. And you're going to do well by others.
Yeah. Although this story takes place in America, it is relevant to people and nations everywhere. And it is a story bigger than one of health alone. It's also about how we can solve our problems. We often look up to politicians and institutions to lead us from a distance. But if we want to take back our future, perhaps we ought to stop looking up and start looking within and around ourselves for solutions. What if millions of people working together could fix many of the most serious problems of our time, all connected with what we choose to eat? It sometimes seems we face historic challenges, but this only means we have an unprecedented opportunity to make a better world. The future is bright. All we need to do is see it.
It starts with one is all it takes. It starts with one step, you're on your way. A revolution starts with one.
As my friend Tom Reiner said in the film, the truth is a stubborn thing. It doesn't go away. And neither did we after the film's release in 2015. We launched our PlantPure organization and developed a line of 30 affordable plant-based entrees. And my wife Kim, who helped in this effort, wrote 2 amazing cookbooks. We also have developed programs to assist doctors, employers, and individuals, and even have a strategy for empowering entire communities around the plant-based nutrition message. And speaking of community, tens of thousands of people answered our call to action, launching hundreds of pods in cities all over the country and around the world. The nonprofit PlantPure Communities leads this pod network and is supporting initiatives to bring nutrition education and low-cost plant-based meals into underserved communities. Most exciting, we are now embarking on an even more ambitious plan, a strategy we are calling our Healing America campaign. We are using a new social action platform that will enable us to support local communities and launching campaigns that bring the message of plant-based nutrition to as many people as possible, including delivering affordable plant-based meals into underserved neighborhoods. We are filming what we do, streaming out short videos so people can follow along and help us expand this model to cities and towns everywhere. We also are producing a feature film as a sequel to PlantPure Nation. We have developed an exciting storyline that goes beyond health to include the urgent issue of climate change, and strategies for political and economic reform based on the idea of empowering local communities to fix social and environmental problems, and not just in the United States, but in countries around the world. We believe we will never heal one another and our planet until we empower people everywhere to fix problems, focusing first on their own communities. We are committed to a peaceful revolution of people helping people and acting boldly to preserve this beautiful blue-green planet we all call home. Please join us by visiting healingamericatogether.com. We encourage you to share this link with as many people as possible. There is power in awareness and power in numbers. Thank you for your support.
One voice, one love, but the truth is beating strong. You're the heart that is its song. All across these wonderlands, people start to take a stand, spreading like a wildfire, one life at a time. Oh, it starts with